Have you been trying to learn ear training and you feel like it's just not clicking? You've done the apps, the exercises, flashcards, programs, and all of it still kind of sounds like noise. I get it. Your ears aren't broken though. I want to tell you that. They're just stubborn. And that is something that we can fix. So, in this video, I want to explain exactly why this happens, what's going on in your brain, and give you a framework to finally break through. And don't worry, we're not going to do what everyone else tells you. This is a more brain-based, realistic approach, and it's based on more recent research, because a lot of the research on ear training that people are using to build apps and talk about ear training in general is from the 1970s and 80s, and we've learned a lot since then. Additionally, a lot of this is going to be based on my experience as a university professor teaching for 8 years in a state school where I would teach ear training for at least 2 hours a day, Monday through Thursday. And so that is a lot of feedback, a lot of real-time experience, and a lot of work at various levels. I dealt with people who were just beginning and people who had perfect pitch, the entire range. And we found techniques that worked for everyone. So I want to talk a little bit about what stubborn ears actually mean and what this means for you. So first of all, stubborn ears, they're not a medical condition. It's just what I'm calling it when someone's brain isn't yet tuned into musical structure. So they can't yet hear what they need to hear to identify intervals, chords, and everything else we try and do in ear training. It's this sort of frustrating state where you want to hear intervals or chords, but they just don't land. They kind of blur together. Or in context, a perfect fifth all of a sudden sounds like a fourth, and intervals lose their independence when you hear them in melodies. This is actually how music is designed. We're not necessarily supposed to be able to sit there and hear every single interval in clarity, but there is also a way to very quickly understand what's going on in the music so that you can notate it and you can articulate your own ideas and you can improvise better. So what's really happening here is that the brain has not yet formed the right neural patterns. So neural patterns, those are sort of these pathways that we create in our brain when we become an expert at something. And we haven't formed them in a consistent way yet to where anytime we hear a perfect fifth, no matter the context, we can identify it. Because context will change what we hear a perfect fifth and how we perceive it. If I play a perfect fifth at the top of the piano, like way up here, it has a different quality than way down here. That almost doesn't even sound like a perfect fifth down there. But there is something that's similar about both of those perfect fifths, and that's what you need to learn to hone in on. What makes it similar? And you need to be able to do it quickly. It can't be this thing where we're sitting here going, trying to hear the bottom note and the top note. That takes too long. You want this instant recognition. So how do we do that? We build the right neural patterns. The idea here is that your ear receives the sound. Your ear is a receptor. It allows us to receive the sound. But it's not the ear that is actually doing the work here. It's your brain. Your brain interprets the sound. And if it doesn't know what to do with the sounds you're hearing, it's going to feel random. And that's too often what happens. So I'm going to include a link to a citation on this. It's basically about informal musical activities and how they're linked to auditory skill development. You can go ahead and check that out for more information if you want. So I want to talk also about why ear training feels so hard. Okay? Ear training is invisible. We can't see it. We don't get that visual feedback like with guitar chords. You've got a fretboard, or piano keys. We can see the notes that are being played. We can tell with 100% certainty if we know how to identify the notes on the piano or the guitar if what we're playing is the right thing because we get that visual feedback. With ear training, it's all happening internally, and that makes it really hard to both measure or trust. So one of the things that ear training doesn't really do, ear training will test you. Ear training will drill you. If you use an app, you can use apps in a way where they're not testing or drilling you, but for the most part, what they're doing is testing and drilling you. Okay? We need to go beyond that. We need to be able to approach things in multiple different ways. So neuroplasticity, it doesn't turn on instantly. Neuroplasticity is this ability to rewire the brain so that we can hear intervals, chords, and everything much more effectively. And it takes consistent repetition to actually rewire your auditory cortex. And it's not just that you can go ahead and play a perfect fifth over and over again until you get it. That doesn't work either. You need consistent repetition, but me just saying practice more, which is generally what people say in ear training programs in the university, like go home and practice more, or they'll give them an exercise. The exercises are random. They're not connected. So you have to be able to connect these exercises in a very logical way. So this is why I can't tell you, do this, do that, do this. I can give you a framework. I can tell you that this exercise helps, this exercise helps, and this exercise helps. But I've tried. When I was in the university, I remember trying different exercises. And each exercise had an effect. But what I realized after the first couple years of teaching was that if they weren't presented in the right order and in the right way, and if students didn't then go home and practice these exercises on their own, they weren't going to improve. So one of the things I always wanted to do, which is what my flawless ear training course is create a step-by-step program that all you have to do is press play, listen, don't think about anything else, and stop for the day. Go about your other musical activities. It's very simple. So now we have that, and I have that available for you. But the good news about all of this neuroplasticity, adults can absolutely rewire their brains for sound recognition, and it doesn't matter how old you are. Somebody who's younger is going to be able to use something that we might call fluid intelligence, and they can pick up on things in some ways more quickly. They're like sponges. They can just pick stuff up. But eventually what happens is as you become an adult, you still need to rewire that brain using sort of methodical exercises. And so while somebody who's younger may be able to pass a test more easily with less time than somebody who's older, the person who's older who has to go through kind of this rigorous and methodical program to learn something can potentially learn it with more long-lasting results than somebody who just picks it up quickly. If you pick it up quickly, you'll have that in your youth, but it can start to fade. There are a lot of examples of people with perfect pitch where the perfect pitch just kind of fades. It's because partially it hasn't been practiced. So if you keep practicing, you get better. So I'm going to go ahead and throw another citation for this, just for people who are interested in some of the science and some of the research that I used. I dug up a lot of this research that I used when I was first developing my ear training programs. Since then, I've gone past that. Since then, I still have this information in my mind when I'm creating courses, but I have so much more to work with that I see, in actual, when actually teaching a course, like when I was in the university and I would try and apply a research-based principle. That was a starting point. And then I saw how the students responded to it semester after semester. And I gradually tweaked things to make them more effective. And you have to remember, I taught from the most basic, students that didn't know anything about music theory or ear training. We call them non-music majors, kind of part of the general university population, to the highest levels in music theory and ear training at the university. I taught undergraduate and graduate students who are just non-music majors trying to get that music elective, and students who are getting their doctoral degrees so they could go teach in universities and things of that nature. So I have a lot of experience with a lot of different types of groups, and my courses, they try to cater to everybody. But at the very basic level, there's some groups that they can't cater to as well, and that's where I have sort of these courses that bridge that gap between beginner and where the flawless course could start. So like the Staff Speaks series, that's if you've never read music. If you are an advanced musician who wanted to take it, you'd still benefit from it, and they're short sessions, only 10 minutes per day, and you'd be done with the first book in 3 months, and you'd have a greater understanding of the staff system, things you probably didn't even know about the staff system. But more importantly, for the more advanced musician, it's going to develop this ability to kind of listen into a note and to get a more full experience of ear training. For the beginner, you're not going to be able to develop your ear too well with it. Your goal is to just learn the notes of the staff. That's it. Just so you can recognize them, the C clef, which are the alto, the tenor, soprano clefs, and the treble and bass, which are the more common ones. So I've got another citation for you on this one. But I want to talk a little bit about mental blocks that actually can kill your progress. This is huge. A lot of people don't talk about the mental baggage that we actually bring into practice rooms. Okay, so the first one is I'm frustrated. You are doing an ear training program, and generally, what ear training programs have you do is they say get a 90% or higher, or get 100%. And because of that strict requirement, you start to believe that, well, if I can get 100% on this drill, and then I can get 100% on the next drill, and they just get progressively harder, I'm going to develop my ear. But you'll reach a point where you get stuck on a drill and you just can't pass it because it's focusing on one specific part of the perfect fifth. It's focusing on one particular way that you might hear it. And if you hear it that way in the wild, you're going to be able to identify it. But if it's in an orchestra or a violin's playing or something about it has changed and you haven't looked at the entire perfect fifth as a whole, you're not going to be able to identify it properly. And so what sometimes happens in my courses, and I have to explain this over and over again, somebody says, I'm starting to get frustrated, I can't pass this lesson. When I first did the Flawless Ear Training course, this was never the goal long term, but when I first did it, I didn't know if I would be able to continue it or how long it would take. And so what I did was I said, work on these exercises until you get a perfect score or you only miss one. That was the early training. And this only happens in Unit 1. Once I got through Unit 3, I went back and I said, okay, now, because I'm caught up and I'm releasing these on a more steady schedule, we can go back and do these courses the way I intended, which was that you would complete a lesson, you do the best you can on it, you put it away for the day, you come back and you do it again. So if you got 100% on the first day, you'll actually go on to the next lesson. But if you got anything less than 100%, then you just do it for a total of 3 days in a row, consecutive days. So that means if you do it 2 days in a row, then you skip a day, now you still have to do it 3 days in a row. And then you can go on to the next lesson. That was how it was always intended, because the way my program is created is that you shouldn't really be able to get 100% on everything. At some point, no matter how good your ear is, you're going to reach a block where you suddenly start making mistakes. And that's fine. That's intended. These drills are supposed to challenge your ear in a different way, preferably every day or every 3 days if you're not getting 100%. And that's going to build the ear much faster than sitting here and treating it like an etude that you have to memorize. If you treat the Flawless course with this idea that you just have to go through and complete it with perfection, you won't develop your ear because the ear isn't perfect. And we have at least, it's 60 days where we're focusing primarily on the perfect fourth and perfect fifth in various different ways. Then we're also building skills to hear other things like first inversion triads and second inversion triads and seventh chords. We're building that base, but we're starting with the foundation. And so if you just go through the training and don't think too much about whether or not you're improving, you'll actually get better results because you are not getting down on yourself, you're reducing the anxiety, and you're just coming in, you're pressing play, and you're done for the day. Okay, so this is something I'm fixing in the Unit 1 course now. I'm going through and I'm removing any references to complete this with 100% because that was never the intention. It was just a means to an end to keep you practicing while it took me a week or so to come out with the next drill. Okay, so that's a big one. Other baggage that we bring in are things like I'm not musical. So a fixed mindset is going to wreck your progress before you even start. If you come in and you say you're not musical, guess what? You're going to realize that in your training. You got to try and get rid of some of these doubts and just trust the training and go in and just do the work, right? Another thing that happens a lot is overtraining. I get this a lot. First of all, if you overtrain, you're going to be really excited in the beginning. You're going to wear your ear out, and then you're going to drop out because you're now exhausted. You're burnt out from ear training. You can't even look at it anymore. No matter how motivated you are to start, if you overtrain, you're shooting yourself in the foot. So more is not better. It's cognitive work. Ear training is cognitive work. And the brain needs rest to organize, consolidate, and build those pathways. You need a break between training and sleep. And one thing I will tell you that is a good technique, if you do your ear training session and then you can take like a 20-minute nap or even a 10-minute nap or do kind of a meditation for 10 minutes, or better yet, do your ear training and then go to sleep for the night, you might see better results. I know that I always did when I did things like this. When I was composing, I'd come up with an idea and then I'd just sleep for like 10 minutes. I try and go to sleep because I'd wake up and then somehow consolidate the information that I just worked on. There's something about working on something right before you sleep that makes the brain say, that was important. Also, if there's a little bit of frustration in there, then that's a cue to the brain that this is not something that is easy for you. We need to make it easy. We're naturally, I think, a little bit lazy, and we want things to be easy. So it's like if you're working out, you build muscle, they're going to grow back stronger because you've torn down the muscle fibers and they grow back stronger. That's just kind of how the body works, including the brain. And so if we stress it out just a little bit, not too much, then the brain's going to say, this is something I need to figure out, and it'll spend more resources to fixing that problem. Another thing that is a common mistake is a wrong learning style. So if you're visual, but you're only using audio drills, you could stall. This is why I do have the visual version of the Flawless course and the audio one. Now, I normally recommend people try the audio first. And the reason for that is the audio is more concise, it's more to the point, and if it works for you, that's great because it's easy. You can download it to your phone, it shows up as an album, you just press play on the track for the day, next day you open it up, go on to the second track if you're ready, otherwise you repeat the first one for a total of 3 days. And it's easy. If you do the visual one, you've got to log into YouTube or my website. They're not downloadable because each video is a couple gigabytes, and that would quickly be a lot of information to be able to just download from a website. It's a little bit too much. So the visual and the audio together is probably the best way to do it, because with the visual ones, especially for unit 1, 2, 3, and 4, you get a bit more explanation for why these concepts work. So you could do a video the first day of the week for a new lesson, and then do the audio for 1 to 3 days. That would probably be the best way to approach the course if you want to do both video and audio. Or you could try and do the audio version first, and then at some point go back and do the video. It's really up to you, but you could just choose one. I recommend choosing the one that works best for you. I will say that the audio version is going to be completed first, and the video version will be completed once I can finish the audio drills, because that's kind of what I'm focusing on. I have a easier time recording audio than video. Another mistake people make is they don't want to sing, they avoid singing. So even if you hate it, vocalizing intervals is going to be one of the fastest ways to improve. When you sing, you hear and you audiate, which is inner hearing. Those three things together are very powerful, because in one instance, noise is coming at you and you're identifying it. In another, you are replicating the sound yourself, and you're putting it out into the world where you can actually hear it. And that makes it easier for most of us to be able to identify if we're singing something correctly or not. Audiation is the hardest because it's completely internal. It's hard to necessarily check to make sure you are audiating correctly. But once you develop it, audiation becomes really easy. Audiation is that ability to take something and hear it internally. So when you're audiating, you're replicating the sound in your mind. And there's a new course I'm doing, the Composing Hour Inner Ear Training. What this does is it's actually going to take you through a complete program where you learn how to audiate. And then through audiation, I also teach you counterpoint, music theory, and form. It's actually a 3-year course. It's very intensive. You can learn more about it if you want to at UreMusic.com. I don't want to spend time talking about it today. The last thing I'm going to talk about is this fear of sounding bad. This is another mental block. None of us are very good until we're good, And your brain can't learn if you're constantly anxious. If you're constantly in a state of stress, and not just a little bit of frustration, but in a state of stress, then it makes it very hard to be able to open up and just hear. So I provided some additional citations on stress and learning as well. That's going to be the 3rd or 4th citation down there. It's by Arnsten, so you can check that out if you want to learn more. So let's talk a little bit about the right order for training your ear. This is a little bit controversial, although more and more people are picking up on this. I don't think you should start with minor seconds or major thirds. I think you need to start with the perfect intervals. They're acoustically stable. They're easily recognizable in a lot of different genres, and they form the foundation of harmony. So I talk more about this in some of my other videos, but the idea here is that you start by learning unisons, perfect fifths, octaves, the perfect fourth, all the perfect intervals. And then you can go on to major and minor thirds, major and minor 6, and then you can deal with the trickier intervals, the more dissonant ones like the major 7th, minor 7th, tritones, and then only at the end you get to the seconds, because even though the seconds form a foundation, we use them all the time. So we're going to be practicing them no matter what. And what we want to do is get that first interval that we learn really well to be one of those perfect intervals that make up a vast majority of music. And the other thing about this is that once you have this sequence actually reflects actual musical structure. It's not just arbitrary, and it allows you to really develop a powerful ear that's going to help you in the long run. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some specific strategies at work. I'll give you a few methods that have helped me and my students rewire their ears. Okay, so you want to make sure you sing every interval. This forces your brain to internalize pitch. You want to use a piano or a keyboard, which I do for you in the Flawless course. You want to match what you hear to what you see. We don't do that too much in the beginning, but we'll do that later on in the course. You should also record yourself when you're singing. So listen back, compare, and adjust. So if you're having trouble in the Flawless course, you want to get a little more out of it, when you do interval singing drills, just press record on your phone, voice memo, whatever you need to do. Record yourself singing them, because when you play them back, now you can kind of see if you're sharp or flat, or if you're hitting the right pitches. The other thing is spaced repetition. You want to have short daily sessions. These are going to be much better than long cram sessions. I've tried both, and it's the short daily sessions that are going to give you the best results. You can also do some ear-based journaling. Note what you've heard in a song, even if you're wrong. So try and notate simple melodies. Come up with a simple melody, one that is at your current level. So if you're learning a perfect fifth or a perfect fourth, then try and write a melody that uses only seconds, like major and minor seconds, the perfect fourth and the perfect fifth. Hear it in your mind first, and then try and notate it. Then go to notation program or your instrument, play it back, and see how close you were. Another thing you can do is record yourself singing the melody, and then you can play that back and dictate it from memory. This is one of the best ways to get better. So a lot of composers don't really need all that much ear training because they're constantly using their ears in this way. You can use tools like Tone Gym, Tenuto, Toned Ear. Those can help you, but if you're doing a course like mine, the Flawless course, all the training you need is actually in there. And if you use another program, it could just provide confusion. It could just make things more difficult for you because all of a sudden you're combining different methods. So I really think you should stick to one method and then just play music and always listen to what you're playing. And that's the best way to develop your ear. Whatever ear training program you choose, stick with it for a couple months and then make a choice. Is it helping me? Is my ear improved? If it has, it's probably worth it to keep going, because ear training is something that takes a while. It's not something you're going to develop in a week or 2 weeks. Any courses that teach you to develop your ear in 1 or 2 weeks are teaching you to do something very specific and that probably won't help you long term. So I think I'll talk a little bit about what worked for me, what kind of finally made ear training click. I've talked about this before, but I was kind of doing some ear training where I was sitting there. I don't exactly remember, but I heard a grandfather clock. And all of a sudden I realized, oh, there's a major third in there. And it was so clear to me, and I just knew what that interval was without thinking about it. And it popped out, and it just said, hey, I'm a major third. And that's when I realized that you could really identify intervals based on their quality. And I was also, I think after that, I started to look for programs, and the one I came across was David Lucas Burge, his ear training program. And then he started talking about this too. He started saying, don't sing songs, don't Here Comes the Bride for a perfect fourth, don't do things like that. What you need to do is get used to the quality and gradually culture the ear. And I found that his course was actually really good, but even that didn't work for me because I reached a certain point and the drills just became too difficult. Like I was hearing inversions, I was hearing all that pretty clearly, but then the moment he opened them up and said, just find the root, find the third, find the fifth, I got lost and I didn't really get past that point. And so I didn't try his perfect pitch program kind of for the same reason. Good ideas and probably would work for some people, but it did not work for me. So I spent a lot of time and years actually trying to get through his course, and it just didn't work. And what I realized I needed was something much more methodical. And his course is very methodical. For the time that it was created, back in I think the 70s or 80s, it was revolutionary. And it was great because there was nothing else like that for people who had not gone to college yet. And even in ear training programs in college, they're not great in a lot of cases. It's more people that have perfect pitch, have already developed the ear, and say, well, the solution is you just need to practice more. And they'll give you exercise to practice, and the exercises are very helpful. But they don't develop the kind of ear that most people want. So I spent months on flashcards. I created flashcards where I'd say, okay, here's a C, sing a perfect fifth above. I'd sing a perfect fifth above, get my C on the piano, and I'd go through this and I'd try and learn my intervals that way. I did all these different things, but the breakthrough really came when I started singing slowly, checking on a keyboard, when I started to play chords like clusters and trying to hear into each individual note so I can hear the bottom note, middle, and top note really easily on a chord like that. And I started to do all these exercises that I do in my flawless course. And then when I started teaching in university, that's when things really came together, because now I could test my techniques on students. And I found out which ones really worked and which ones did not. And you always feel kind of dumb at first, but when you kind of let go, when you start hearing things from all these different dimensions, that's when you actually hear the intervals for the first time. It's like, you can hear that and you can use Star Wars to identify it. But that's not hearing the interval. That's hearing a part of a song, which is what we're kind of designed to do. But there is also this ability to just know that's a perfect fifth. There is no process in my mind for identifying a perfect fifth. I just hear it and I know it's a perfect fifth. And how I got there was lots of repetition, lots of listening deeply into notes, and a very methodical approach that, frankly, I developed over 20 years. So it wasn't the exercises that mattered, it was how I practiced and in what order. And once I figured that out, I started using it on my university students, and partly I have them to thank for that. And that's how I discovered the sequences that you're seeing in this massive flawless course that I'm creating. So my final takeaways here, if you've got stubborn ears, remember, it's not about talent, it's about wiring. You have to rewire your brain. You also need the right order, the right tools, and the right mindset. Mindset is huge. You have to have this attitude where I'm just going to come in every day. I'm not going to think too much about it. I'm going to do my ear training, and I'm going to do it every day. I'm going to commit to this, and this is just something I do as part of my musicianship training. And if you do that, you will learn to hear these intervals. You also need to be patient, be strategic, although I do most of that for you, and be consistent. So just show up each day, press play. Even if you're in a hurry, you can play it while you're taking a shower or whatever you need to do. Just try and do it every day. And if you want my step-by-step ear training, just check out the Flawless course here on YouTube, or you can go over to my website, UreMusic.com. There's both a video and an audio-based version. Again, I recommend trying the audio first. If that doesn't work for you, the visual one provides additional tips and training. But they both work on the same concept. So you could do Unit 1, Lesson 1 at the same time for both the video and the audio. They're meant to work together. So I'm also curious, let me know what's been hardest for you in your ear training. I do read everything that people post here. And you could also influence the way that I continue to revise and update these programs in the future. So let me know if you have any questions. I'd love to answer them, and I will see you next time.